no fiat currency has ever lasted more than about 50 years, ever. There's thousands of them. So I think we're headed for a currency crisis, and we're going to see some type of new monetary system. I think it's all but inevitable. What exactly that looks like, I don't know. But I suspect that the IMF will be involved, and it'll be more of a global restructuring of the new global monetary system as opposed to just simply US-centric.
Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Inside the Market. We are more than honored to be sitting down today with Stephen Penny, founder of Silver Chartist Report at silverchartist.com. Thank you so much, Stephen, for joining us today.
You bet. Thank you so much for inviting me back.
Our pleasure. I want to speak about the year in silver in particular and also gold. So we've obviously seen inflation as the talk of the town over the last 6 to 8 months, maybe even a year, certainly in some circles longer than that. I'm curious, what effect has that had on silver and gold yet? And then we'll speak about what we can see in the future.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's 2021, a year to a lot of precious metals investors are looking forward to getting this year over with because it's been certainly disappointing. From my perspective, I think silver and especially gold are very forward-looking. They're probably the most forward-looking markets out there. So coming out of the March 2020 pandemic crash, if you will, silver and gold were amongst the first to recover, and they performed best. And then, for the last year now, since August of 2020, when they peaked, they've been grinding lower. And that's been, confusing to a lot of investors as we're seeing all this inflation. And I think the precious metals probably were looking forward towards taper and, perhaps an interest rate hike or two. But now that we've got that behind us, I think the next move is probably going to be for the Fed to reverse course and go back to easing and, stop any talk of taper and tightening once we see a pullback in general equities. And I think that all awaits in 2022. So I think 2022 is going to be a much better year for precious metals investors.
What have we seen in 2021 in terms of precious metals?
Yeah, so maybe I take it for granted that people are familiar, but August 2020 was when silver and gold peaked. Silver peaked around $30.35. And then we went and revisited that peak in silver on February 1st. We reached $30, just over $30 again on the silver squeeze. And that was the peak for the year, very early in 2021. And we've just gradually trended lower throughout the whole year, even as inflation has picked up. So that's been disappointing for investors, but I think that's going to reverse in probably 2022. Can
you tell us about the silver squeeze? What do we see there?
So it started in late 2020. Some of you guys may have heard of the Reddit group that were squeezing GameStop and some other kind of really poor quality stocks. GameStop, AMC movie theaters. These garbage stocks were moving up like hundreds and hundreds of percent. And then there was a movement within inside of that Reddit community to, hey, if you want to squeeze something, do it to physical silver. And they've rallied, I think there are over 100,000 people now to go out and buy physical silver on a certain date. And they did that, I think it was February 1st, if memory serves me correctly, of 2021. And we did, they affected the price. We saw a nice move up, but only lasted for a few days. But that movement is still out there, and they're growing. And that's putting more constraint on the supply demand fundamentals, which is just another bullish factor for silver.
Has the silver market ever seen anything like what we saw in February in terms of the silver squeeze? Has any market seen something like that?
Well, the answer is yes. Stocks and sectors can get squeezed. That happens somewhat frequently. I think, a lot of people within that movement were looking for silver to just keep going vertical. And that's typically not the way markets work. This is a marathon, not a sprint. And it's encouraging to see that group continuing to take physical metal off the market. And I think over the long term, it's going to have a big effect.
What pressures do you think we saw on silver in particular after February silver squeeze? And I might add that I think it's unique for a group of Redditors to kind of gather around any sort of equity or commodity and attempt a squeeze on it. Of course, there was a venture capital firm or hedge fund, I forget the name, that ultimately went bankrupt and needed a bailout, I believe, or needed some financing. And I think that's what is unique in terms of the Wall Street silver squeeze. But I'm curious, what factors weighed on silver to lead to this downtrend that we've seen throughout the rest of 2021?
Yeah, like I said, it's been confounding to many silver investors. It's almost inexplicable, but I think the market had been looking forward to tighter Fed monetary policy. I don't believe that's going to last. I think they're going to have to reverse course. I think the market was looking forward to that. I do think manipulation is a factor. I don't blame every down move or everything on manipulation, but that's a headwind for silver, of course. And when everything else is going up, I think general equities took with so many hot sectors, that just kind of took some attention away from precious metals. But everything's cyclical, and I'm confident the capital is going to flow back into the metals.
Jeff Clark at the StockPulse Silver Symposium mentioned that during the 1976 to 1980 economic crisis in the United States, precious metals didn't really catch a bid until the end of that period. Do you expect similar?
I do. Yeah, there's a saying. I think David Morgan, who's also at that symposium, I think he's the one who coined the phrase that 90% of the move tends to happen in the last 10% of the time. And that's often very true in all markets, but especially commodities. And if you go back to the 70s bull market, it was 1978 to 1980, roughly just over a year period of time where silver did the majority of its move. And in that decade where silver went up, I believe 36-fold, there were multiple sharp corrections, and one where silver fell by over 50% prior to making that big move towards the end. And I think we're probably doing something very similar right now. We're shaking loose a lot of the weekends before a really nice move to the upside.
What do you enjoy most about charting the silver and precious metals prices?
Yeah, I started off just it's the fundamentals that drew me into the sector. And, it was around 2014, 15, 16 in there that I really got into technical analysis. And what I like so much about it is I call it information density. I believe price and volume overlaid on a chart can give you more information on one page than, a 10, 20 page report, because you can see what these institutions and big money are actually doing. When it comes to fundamental analysis, you might read one 30-page report that says one thing and another 30-page report that says another, and you've got intelligent people, and now you're trying to decide who's right. Where the price action on the chart tells you what's happening, and I just find it extremely interesting.
For those who are interested in learning about charting different equities, stocks, even cryptocurrencies, where would you suggest they start in terms of not reading? Let's say, of course, they've read a little bit, they keep on reading, but in terms of actually putting this into action, where do you suggest they start? How do you suggest they start?
Well, a couple things. I mean, you mentioned probably not books, but I mean, that's how I started. There's a big fat textbook. It's called Technical Analysis of the Financial Markets by John Murphy. That's a great place to start. But if you don't want to necessarily start there, there's online resources. And I would say get some charting software. I use TradingView. I love TradingView, but there's other good ones out there. And just start drawing charts. When I was new to this, I would spend hours just drawing charts and back testing patterns and experimenting. And if you're interested in it, that the best way to learn is to start doing it.
How do you back test patterns?
Well, there's tools on TradingView has tools where you can go back and run back tests. But really, you can just pick a chart, like say silver chart. You can go back and try and find patterns and see how price reacted. Some of the classical patterns. I like triangle patterns. You can look at head and shoulders. You can look at all kinds of patterns. You can look how price responds around certain moving averages. I like to put the 200-day moving average on every single chart. So those are just some examples.
Are there any points in 2021 that you found notable in terms of price and volume action?
Yeah, there were. I'll pull up a silver chart here. I don't have to share my screen, but I'll just describe it to you. I mentioned the 200-day moving average. I think that's probably the most important indicator that anyone can put on a daily chart, because it's the most, from my perspective, I believe it's the most used input in these institutional trading algorithms. And it was, you can see how well price respects the 200-day moving average. I'm just getting a chart here. But back in July of 2021, the silver price was just hovering right along the 200-day moving average. I mean, it's obvious when you put that line on the chart, that price respects it. I mean, it kept tapping it to almost the penny. And then when that gave way, that's a sell signal. And that's when, we started seeing much more aggressive selling in towards the end of the summer and mid-July.
What are you expecting from 2022 in terms of silver and gold?
Well, predictions are always difficult, especially when with regard to the future. I forget who said that quote, but I think what is very likely here is that general equities have never been more overvalued on a fundamental basis. I don't think ever in all of history, and we're certainly due for a sharp pullback. I'm not calling for some massive crash, although that's possible. But I think a 10-20% pullback in general equities would be enough to cause the Federal Reserve to reverse course on taper, to reverse course on talk about raising interest rates. And that would just be rocket fuel for the precious metals. So I'm looking for that to happen sometime in 2022, probably in the first half.
So you don't expect there to be any sort of tapering?
Well, they're already doing it. So I do think that they're going to continue to taper. Whether they get an interest rate hike in or not, I'm not sure. That they're saying the first rate hike might be in, I believe, June or July of 2022. I'm not sure they'll get that rate hike in, but they're already tapering. I just don't think they're going to continue to do it. I don't think they're going to be able to get back to zero because they're still printing money. They're still, doing quantitative easing. I just don't think they're going to get it all the way to zero as they reduce their asset purchases.
And then we could see another series of stimulus, you believe, in 2022?
Yeah, I think it's simple math. I think they have to. In 2021, I believe that the Fed purchased 55% of federal treasuries. So if we're going to continue to spend money into oblivion, who's going to lend it to us? And up into, it's been the Federal Reserve buying over half of those treasuries, half the government debt. If not, who's going to buy it? And to incentivize new buyers of that debt, the interest rates would have to rise. Well, we have a $30 trillion national debt. So if interest rates just rose to like their historical norm around 5%, 5% of 30 trillion is $1.5 trillion of interest payments. Like that can't happen. The government can't allow that to happen. So I think they're going to have no choice but to, reverse course and keep interest rates artificially suppressed. And that involves more currency creation.
What factors or fundamentals made you so interested in silver and gold?
Yeah, that's a great question because to me, when I started learning how the monetary system actually works, it's like they don't teach you this stuff in school. But when you learn that currency is borrowed into existence and it's lent into existence from a private entity, otherwise known as the Federal Reserve, which is no more federal than Federal Express, and then we owe the populace owes that debt back to a private entity at interest. It leads you down a path towards being interested in honest money. And silver and gold have been money for millennia, and they always do a full accounting for the expansion of debt-based fiat currency. And I don't think this time will be any different. So that's a little bit of the background how I got so interested in this.
And how have the fundamentals changed since you first got into silver and gold? Have they changed?
Yeah, they've only gotten stronger. Back when I first started looking at this and learning about this, the national debt was around 8 trillion. Like I said, now we're almost at $30 trillion. And we're coming to a point where this is going to resolve itself. There's no solution anymore. There's only a managed outcome. And where we're headed right now, the government basically has two choices. They can continue to debase the currency, or they can default honestly on all their obligations because it's mathematically impossible for them to repay them. The debt cannot be repaid. The unfunded contingent liabilities cannot be paid. Medicare, Social Security, pensions, federal pensions, there's not enough money. So they have two choices. They can default or they can continue to debase the currency. And all of history suggests that politicians in this exact situation always choose to debase their currency because people don't understand it. They don't understand inflation. They don't know who to blame and get mad at. And they end up getting mad at each other instead of the people who caused it. So, that the situation is only, the bullish factors for silver and gold have only gotten stronger over the years, despite the poor price action.
Okay, let's say we default. The United States government defaults on its debts. What do you see happening in that situation?
Well, I don't think they're going to do that. I don't think there's any chance they'll do that because they can print. In a moment of candor, Alan Greenspan, he said that, of course, after he was no longer head of the Federal Reserve, said the U.S. government will never default on its debts because we have a printing press. Well, he was being totally honest there. So that's what they're going to do, and I have no doubt about that. They're going to continue to debase the currency, and that is always beneficial for silver and gold.
What is the outcome of that?
Well, I think we're headed for a currency crisis, and no fiat currency has ever lasted more than about 50 years, ever. No, there's thousands of them. So I think we're headed for a currency crisis, and we're going to see some type of new monetary system. I think it's all but inevitable. What exactly that looks like, I don't know, but I suspect that the IMF will be involved, and it'll be more of a global restructuring, a new global monetary system as opposed to just simply U.S. centric. And you can actually go to imf.org and read white papers about the things they're planning. They've got plans in place for when this happens. But as far as what path they take, we could speculate. There's special drawing rights. Some people speculate that may play a role. Will there be gold backing? Will blockchain be involved? I really don't know, but those are all things that are being discussed.
What role do gold and silver have in a globalized IMF managed monetary system?
Well, I don't know. Do they go to eventually to a complete gold backing? That's the last thing they want to do, but they may do it if they have to. So I don't know. You can speculate, but we can watch what they do. And we know that central banks around the world are buying gold hand over fist, while everyone else deplores it. I like to say, follow the money, and smart money, central bankers, high net worth individuals, institutions are buying physical metal hand over fist. And that includes, governments and central banks around the world.
So we kind of talked about how precious metals investors would rather forget 2021 in some ways, but gold has actually performed quite well over the last, say, 18 months. It's at least perked up and had some interesting runs, and it's not too far off from its all-time high either. Can you speak a little bit to that?
Yeah, gold has certainly held up better than silver, which is what you would expect. Silver is much more volatile than gold. The all-time high in gold is $2,089. That was marked in August of 2020. And here we are right around 1,800. So we're not down very far. In fact, during the course of the year, gold never pulled back 20%, a full 20%, which many people define as a bear market. So it's held up much better. I look at gold as just more of a way to preserve purchasing power. If you're buying gold hoping to get rich off of it, I think you're using the wrong vehicle. I look at gold as a way to preserve purchasing power, and it's done that. Gold has done that very well, and I expect it to continue to do that. And by the way, on gold made that new all-time high in August. Well, every time gold goes to make a new multi-year new all-time high, silver always follows suit, and it hasn't done that yet. The all-time high in silver is up near 50, and here we are down below 24. We're actually in right around $22. So we're well off the all-time high. So I do think silver is probably going to outperform gold going forward.
We've heard, of course, that silver is one of the most, or if not the most, undervalued asset in the world. What do you think about that sentiment?
Yeah, I agree 100%. It's, to my knowledge, silver is the only commodity on planet Earth that is still trading below where it was in 1980, 40 years ago. And not only is it just a little bit below, it's less than half. It got to $50 in 1980, and here we are 22. So yeah, I do believe it's the most undervalued metal on the planet. And I think platinum is a close second. We haven't talked about platinum, but platinum really has my attention here as well.
Why?
Because it's so undervalued. I like to look at ratio charts a lot, and when I look at a ratio chart of gold to platinum has never been so undervalued relative to gold. In fact, platinum almost always throughout history trades at a premium to gold. It's more expensive. Well, right now, platinum is below $1,000, and gold's up at 1,800. So this is a historic anomaly, and platinum is even undervalued on a ratio basis relative to silver, as surprising as that may sound. Now, look, I don't view platinum as a safe haven or anything like that. We're headed into a currency crisis, and platinum is not my vehicle to protect myself from a currency crisis. However, I think all commodities will do well, and platinum, I think, is probably going to be probably one of the best performing commodities over the next handful of years. And I put a portion of my portfolio into platinum for sure.
We've had the honor of sitting down and speaking today with Stephen Penny, founder of the Silver Chartist report, which you can find at silverchartist.com. Thank you so much, Stephen, for joining us today.
You bet. Thank you, Justin. Appreciate it.
Our pleasure. And thank you, everyone, for listening to this edition of Inside the Markets presented by StockPulse.com.